If you're a fan of role-playing on the Sega CD, then boy do I have great news for you! This week we learned that the Lunar Remastered Collection will be hitting the PlayStation 4 and 5 next spring. This compilation will include Lunar, the Silver Star, and Lunar Eternal Blue, giving both updated graphics, improved sound, and other quality-of-life improvements. Yeah, that's exciting news. But are either of these role-playing games actually worth playing? And what about the Nintendo DS game that won't be included in the package? Is that any fun? To answer these questions, I decided to flip through the pages of Electronic Gaming Monthly, Machines Sega, Die Hard Game Fan, and other classic magazines to see what the critics said back when these games first came out. Oh, I sure hope you don't mind random battles, because it's all about Lunar in this episode of Review Crew.
Lunar 剣を抜いて冒険の世界へファンタジック RPG ルナシルバースターストーリールナ
Well, Sega was spending way too much money and focus on their multimedia studio designed to make CDs that appealed to American gamers. Working Designs was doing what fans actually wanted by bringing Japanese role-playing games to the United States. Lunar, the Silver Star, was their first Sega CD game, bringing one of Game Art's best games to the United States after its successful launch in Japan. This was a lengthy adventure full of amazing boss fights, memorable characters, and a killer soundtrack. But it was actually the localization job that set it apart from the more straightforward role-playing games of that era. At first, both critics and consumers liked the pop culture references and the stabs at comedy. But as tastes and expectations changed over the years, many turned on the localization. Keep that in mind as we look at what the critics said back in 1993. Let's go ahead and kick things off with Electronic Gaming Monthly, who was a little mixed on the Sega CD release. They gave Lunar an average score of 7.6 out of 10 and raved about the CD soundtrack. Just love that title song. RPG fans will definitely want to check out this adventure game that has some absolutely beautiful music, absent in some RPGs. The fighting sequences are a bit dull, though. If EGM's score seemed a little bit low, that's because it was. While game players ended up giving the game a slightly lower 75%, it was actually Edge who gave Lunar the worst marks. Scoring a mere 6 out of 10, Edge didn't feel like the game was, next generation enough. Compared to the beautiful cutscenes and professional speech, the crude backdrops and tiny sprites do little to fire the imagination. Sadly, the gameplay suffers too. Lunar fits cozily in the old school of Japanese role-playing where combat is completely random. As soon as you leave a village, it's pure luck whether you get attacked or not. And sometimes there can be several battles in the space of a few paces. Lunar's trimmings make good use of the Mega CD, but as a game, it falls short of the likes of Landstalker and Secret of Mana. Alright, now that we've been to the bottom, let's go ahead and work our way up. EGM's sister publication, Mega Play, liked the game a whole lot more than the flagship magazine, giving Lunar a score of 83%. Game Informer went a little bit higher, showing up with an 8.5 out of 10. And then there's Machines Sega, which may have given this RPG an 86%, but their actual review suggests that they liked it even less than Edge. The one thing that Lunar has in its favor is that similar games for the Mega CD are rarer than Take That fans at a Mensa meeting. That said, there are plenty of similar games on cartridge, and to be honest, Lunar doesn't offer that much extra. The CD medium allows for real adventuring potential, but this effort falls a little short of the mark. A nice try, but no cigar. Don't worry, Lunar fans, there were magazines that not only liked the game, but loved it. The stupidly named Video Games, the Ultimate Gaming magazine, gave the Silver Star a score of 9 out of 10, while Sega Power went a little bit higher with a 91%. However, the real story here is Die Hard Game Fan, who was smitten by the Sega CD release. Skid said that Lunar is far and away the best RPG I've ever played in English. Everything is perfect. The graphics, the fighting engine, the music, and the story. Working Designs knows how to translate RPGs and has converted the game so well that it's better than the original. Set aside a week this Christmas and escape with Lunar. Kid Fan also loved the game. Working Designs has translated the greatest RPG of all time for the Sega CD, and it is truly amazing. Imagine Final Fantasy on the Sega CD with better graphics, music, and one of the greatest stories ever told, and you have Lunar. It's also one of the longest RPGs I've ever played on a CD. If you're a lucky owner of a Sega CD, buy it and prepare to be blown away to RPG heaven. Die Hard Game Fan gave Lunar an average score of 97%. Look, I'll admit, their enthusiasm for this game was infectious. I ran out and bought the game immediately after reading those reviews, and I loved every second of it. I can't wait to revisit this classic when it's remastered next year.
アレスよ、新たなる伝説を呼び起こせ。セガサターン版ファンタジー RPG ルナ・シルバースターストーリー9月上旬発売予定。
Released 2 years after the first Lunar, Eternal Blue jumps 1,000 years and tells the story of a new batch of adventurers. This was an even bigger and more polished role-playing game that not only expanded on the story and lore, but also offered a variety of improvements, including more detailed graphics, longer cinemas, and even more voice acting. Yeah, it still suffers from many of the RPG cliches that critics complained about in 1993, but Sega CD owners didn't mind. They were just happy to be getting anything in 1995. Now, when it comes to the critics, most seem to like this sequel as much as the original, if not a little bit more. Let's once again start with Electronic Gaming Monthly, who gave Lunar 2 the lowest score of any of the major magazines, an average score of 7.75 out of 10. Sushiek summed it up this way: "This may not be Final Fantasy III, but it's still a good game in its own right. One of the strongest points is the cool cinemas. The overall graphics are decent and the sounds are good. It has a very simplified control using one button for pretty much everything. I kinda like the simplicity, and I don't think that it subtracted from the gameplay. It may not be the best, but it's a good choice for the Sega CD." Al wasn't as kind. Compared to other RPGs out there, this one simply doesn't stack up. It does not have superb graphics, sound, or even music, but it does have a story. Of course, the all-important, usually absent ingredient is there: fun. Imagine that, a fun game. There's no zippy spells and plot twists from hell, but there is enjoyment. The good news is that it's all up from here. Next Generation ended up giving the game a score of 4 out of 5. While Game Players went one tick higher with an 81%. Game Informer liked it even more than that, giving it an average score of 8.8 out of 10. Andy, the game hombre, called Eternal Blue a great follow-up to the original Lunar. Although the characters' voices are a little hokey and the on-screen character icons are a little small, the game is still great. I really like that you have to purchase your saves and magic upgrades, so the play is riskier. However, if you like hardcore RPGs, all I have to say is that the game takes a long time to finish, and then there's a 6-hour epilogue that has another mini-quest. Need I say more? Now, going up the scale, we have GamePro weighing in with a 4.5 out of 5. However, once again, the real story is Die Hard Game Fan. After giving the first game an average score of 97%, they came down a little bit with Lunar 2. E-Storm explains that Lunar marks a fond farewell to the Sega CD. I actually waited for the translated version this time rather than playing through the import as I normally do. Eternal Blue is as good a 16-bit RPG as you'll ever play, if you can look past the drama-draining modern-day jokes that really break the mood. I don't know who Lunar 2 is aimed at, but I felt a tad insulted at times. That's why I play imports. Role-playing games are my escape and should be commercial-free. Nick Rocks liked it a little bit more, but also took issue with the localization. Reviewing this undeniably almighty RPG is painful for me as I'm faced with the greatest of game art's staff of ultra-talented artists, musicians, game designers, and scenario writers, and the pain of working designs writers. The Japanese Eternal Blue ranks as one of the best games ever made, yet Working Designs broke the magic experience point system and ruined the translation with cute playground jokes aplenty. But even after all of the injustice Eternal Blue has been put through, you still have to buy this game if you consider yourself at all infatuated with role-playing games. Die Hard Game Fan gave Lunar 2 an average score of 91%. You know, it's interesting that Die Hard Game Fan was among the first critics to sound the alarm about Working Design's localizations, something that fans would eventually turn on. That said, Eternal Blue is still a strong follow-up, unlike the next game we're going to be talking about. A full decade after the release of Eternal Blue, Lunar returned with Dragon's Song on the Nintendo DS. While fans were initially excited, that enthusiasm would prove to be short-lived. Dragon's Song ended up scrapping the things that people loved about the franchise, including cinema scenes and voice acting, all while keeping most of the outdated RPG elements from the 1990s. What's more, this DS game actually added a few gimmicks, including touchscreen gameplay, battles that are spread across multiple screens, and even voice commands using the built-in microphone. Longtime fans were not impressed, and as it turns out, neither were the critics. Once again, Electronic Gaming Monthly is at the bottom with the lowest score. Greg is absolutely dumbfounded by this game, asking this important question. How could they have screwed up Lunar this badly? I don't mind the developers messing with one of my favorite role-playing game series, but when they go so far backwards as to make the game feel archaic, it's really upsetting. Throw your intricate strategies right out the window because all targets will be chosen at random. And I hope you like menus because even the most basic action in the overworld involves dozens of them. But maybe that's just to keep the overall theme of quiet frustration going, since movement is agonizingly slow and commanding your party to run from place to place actually costs you hit points. When the fundamentals are botched this badly, not even Dragon's Song's semi-decent story can save it. Electronic Gaming Monthly gave the game an average score of 4.7 out of 10. Game Informer was equally baffled, though it ended up giving the game an average score of 5.1 out of 10. Here's some more questions. How about the great plan that one can either get experience or items in a battle, but never both? Meaning players have little indication of what kind of experience level they should be at for a new zone. Can you imagine if it cost you hit points when you ran? And what if, when you're in battle, all you can do is attack? And you can't pick a target. What? Let's make a secondary character with neither combat power nor magic points. She's not any good at all until level 10. I don't know what they were thinking, but even the freaking dragons are missing until a dozen hours in. Most of the time I was playing Lunar, I just couldn't figure out why a game would do this to fans. I don't use this example lightly, but think back to Grabbed by the Ghoulies, a similarly good-looking but unfun and almost unplayable nightmare of gameplay design missteps. Now, it is worth mentioning that there were magazines that liked Dragon's Song a little bit more, including NGC Magazine, which gave it a 59%, and Hardcore Gamer Magazine, who gave it a so-so 3 out of 5. Believe it or not, Nintendo Power was the magazine that liked Lunar the most. Yes, they agreed with the other critics about some of the shortcomings, but they ultimately gave it a 7 out of 10 and concluded that despite falling short of expectations, Lunar Dragon's Song ultimately delivers a worthwhile adventure. The story has its moments, the music is quite good, and for longtime fans, Toshiyuki Kabuka's character designs lend the game a warm familiarity. The series deserves better than Dragon's Song, though. Hopefully, Game Arts will hand the reins back to the original development team and recapture that lost magic. Yeah, that's not exactly a full-throated recommendation, but it's way more than you're getting from EGM or Game Informer. Look, this game is bad, and it's probably not even going to be included in the upcoming Remastered Collection. I say let Dragon Song stay in 2005, where it belongs.
そこには愛がありますか？違う星に生まれた2人、出会い、共に戦い、そしてルナ2、ついにプレイステーションで新発売。ルシアー!
Hey, thanks for watching me break down these classic reviews. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we have a whole playlist full of these episodes. Boy, it has to be over 100 episodes at this point. So, give it a binge when you have a minute. Now, here's the question I have for you. What's your favorite Lunar game? Also, should they include Dragon Song in the collection? Who knows, maybe there's a groundswell of support out there and they're missing out by not including it. In other news, we'll be back next week with the first of many spooky videos that will run through Halloween. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,